Imagine this. A rusty lantern becomes a sanctuary where a sparrow lands like it owns the afternoon. Imagine red polka teacup mushrooms lining a mossy path, as if a tiny world finally decided to show itself. Imagine sunlight breaking into rainbows from a mirror sunburst, while a chandelier of tin cans turns slowly and the garden hums. What if trash was just a story waiting for you to finish it? Today, we turn forgotten things into garden treasure, little scenes of peace, color, and quiet awe. Stay with me. Your backyard is about to feel like a secret you just remembered. Welcome to Archon Aesthetic Studio, a small corner where soulful upcycled garden art comes to life. If ideas like fairy corners, bottle totems, mirror light, and rustic stone magic make your heart spark, subscribe and join this weekly series. I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments so our little garden community can say hello. One, Teacup Mushroom Path, Fairy Illusion, Bold Reds. Imagine walking a path so small it might belong to a story you once forgot. The grass hushes underfoot, and a thin ribbon of moss guides you forward. Along the edge, bright caps rise, red as summer strawberries, freckled with white, their stems slender and sure. They were teacups once, quiet in the back of a cupboard, carrying the echo of conversations and warm afternoons. Now they lean toward the sun like tiny guardians, keeping watch over thyme and clover. Light rests on the glaze, soft as breath, and the air smells of damp soil and citrusy marigolds. Here, color is not loud, it is certain. Each dotted cap is a punctuation mark in green, a gentle reminder that small things can lead the way. The eye follows their procession, a little parade of cheerfulness, and the heart follows after. Somewhere between cup and mushroom, between memory and moss, usefulness becomes wonder. In this corner, the garden learns a new language, playful, humble, true. And just beyond the last cap, another story waits to be found, where an old lantern remembers how to hold light again. Two, Lantern Bird Feeder Sanctuary, Thrift to Living Sculpture. Imagine a lantern that once kept flame from the wind now learning a new way to hold light. It hangs from a branch on a simple loop of twine, its corners warmed by the morning, its metal worn the way good stories are, soft at the edges. Inside, a porcelain teacup rests where candles used to live, filled with seed like a gentle promise. Lavender leans nearby and the air moves in herb-scented breaths. Nothing shouts here, everything invites. You can almost hear yesterday in the patina. Dinners, laughter, a quiet table cleared at dusk. All of that is here, and something more. Small wings you may not see yet. A hush of motion at the edge of your gaze. The cup is an altar to ordinary grace, and the lantern, a frame for noticing. When sunlight slips through the open sides, it sketches soft squares across time and pebble. A simple geometry of belonging. In the garden, usefulness and beauty fall into step. The old holds the living answers back. And just a few steps away, something playful waits. Bright circles of tin turning slowly, a chorus of color ready to catch the breeze and continue the tale. 3. Tin can chandelier feeder, kinetic bloom wheel. Imagine a circle quietly turning above the flowers, as if the wind found a wheel and taught it how to sing. Around a wire rim, tin cans, once ordinary, maybe dented, become petals of a moving bloom. Pastel paint softens their history, a few scuffs left on purpose, the kind of proof that life has already passed this way. Inside each, a small offering, seeds the color of dusk, or sprigs of herb that breathe a clean, familiar fragrance. When light touches the metal, it travels, and the eye follows, drifting from can to can like a slow clock that tells a gentler time. There is a music here, not loud but present. The hush of chords, the light tap of rim against rim, a rhythm that invites birds to consider landing. Below, marigolds keep watch like tiny suns, and the air carries the bright spice of their patience. It's a sculpture without pride, a humble crown for any branch willing to hold it. Motion gathers, then lets go. Not far from this spinning halo, another circle waits, punched with small stars, made for draining, now made for overflowing. A colander finds the sky and decides it can cradle blossoms. 2. Four, colander hanging planters, floating flower bowls. Imagine a bowl that once lived by steam and kitchen windows now learning the language of sky. It hangs from a simple chain, steady in the soft breath of noon, and every hole it carries becomes a small star, spilling light onto leaves below. Inside, moss keeps its quiet promise while ivy trails like handwriting in green. Geraniums lift their bright faces, confident, uncomplicated, turning a tool of yesterday into a cradle for color. There is a sweetness to metal that has worked hard. A pale patina, a memory of water, a curve that feels familiar in the hand. Up here, though, weight becomes grace. The bowl is lighter than its history, and the garden answers with shadows that flicker like laughter. Beneath it, time leans close and the path catches a coin sparkle of sun through perforations. The whole scene feels like a secret that didn't try to hide. This is what reuse can be, not correction, but release. A small miracle hung at eye level where anyone passing can remember abundance. And as the light deepens, something else begins to shimmer nearby. Glass and mirror gathering daylight, ready to scatter it back like rain. Five, mirror sunburst and CD prism garland, light catchers on the fence. Imagine a circle of light stitched to old timber, the fence becoming a quiet horizon for brightness to arrive. Driftwood forms a patient ring, its grain like shorelines remembered, and from the center a sun awakens, small facets set in a calm radius, each one catching breath from the day. When morning turns its face here, reflections wander across the boards in gentle commas of silver. By noon, color slips in, a string of humble discs, once songs on plastic, now lending rainbows to the time below. The bands are so faint you have to lean closer to believe them, and that is part of their grace. The garden learns a new music made of glints. Shadows do not disappear. They soften, and the light writes through them as if sending letters you can read with your skin. Ivy traces the margins, marigolds hold the sun that mirrors cannot, and the fence, weathered and honest, becomes a gallery for small miracles. Here, brightness is not a shout but a kindness. It shows the shape of time and then steps aside. Ahead, color gathers again in a different way. Fragments of tile, a quiet drawer, and succulents rising like little constellations in clay. Six, Mosaic drawer planter, broken tiles, living art. Imagine a rectangle of remembered things resting in the sun. Wood that once knew the weight of letters, tile that once held tea to the lip, colors that traveled quietly across years. Now they meet again on the garden floor. The drawer is shallow, but its story is deep. A face stitched with small, irregular blues and whites, the grout like gentle rivers between islands. Inside, succulents gather in a constellation. Silver rosettes, pale jade paddles, a sudden blush on a leaf's edge, as if the sky had decided to grow at ground level. Touch the tiles and the surface answers back with a cool, honest firmness. Brush the soil and it exhales the scent of clay and patient water. The wood shows its time without apology, softened at the corners, a frame that understands how to hold without holding tight. Light moves across the shards in careful flashes, a quiet applause for everything salvaged and set to bloom. Here, brokenness becomes pattern, fragments become chorus. The eye lingers, tracing the curve of a rosette, the seam of a memory. And just beyond this small geometry, another shape waits, a humble chair that forgot to be a seat and learned how to carry flowers instead. Seven, chair planter Oasis, a seat that chose to bloom. Imagine a chair that forgot how to wait. Once it held evenings and conversations, the weight of a book, the brief hush between teacup and saucer. Now it gathers color. Where a seat used to be, a round cradle breathes, burlap and wire holding a small, living spill of petunias and herbs. Paint loosens on the slats like old laughter, and ivy learns the shape of the armrest by touch. Sunlight slows here, catching on the rim of the liner, soaking into leaves that know the difference between morning and almost noon. There is kindness in things that retire into beauty. Wood softened by weather becomes a frame for bright murmurs of bloom. The garden answers with a path of pale stones and the faint scent of rosemary that lingers at the edge of the moment. Nothing is hurried. Everything is listening. You can see yesterday held lightly in the patina and today unfolding from it. Green and sure. Close by, a small shimmer hints at sound. Metal with memory, waiting for the breeze to find it. The chair has chosen to bloom. The air is ready to sing. Eight, Silverware Windchime, cutlery that learned a song. Imagine sounds stitched from memory, a row of spoons and forks, none of them matching, each one holding an echo from a different table. They hang beneath the porch beam like notes on a patient staff, silver softened by time, the driftwood bar a quiet conductor. When the breeze arrives, it writes a small song, clean and bright, metal against metal, a chime that feels like sunlight tapping on water. You can almost taste old kitchens in it. Steam, stories, hands resting for a moment between work and laughter. The garden leans in to listen. Lavender trades its calm with the air. Time answers in green syllables, and shadows flicker across the decking as if the tune had weight. Nothing here is precious except presence. A knot of twine, a nick on a spoon bowl, a dull sheen where a knife once cut celebration into slices. The wind finds these histories and threads them into now. Music doesn't claim the space, it blesses it. Even the silence afterward seems improved, like the pause between heartbeats. And nearby, as if waiting for a chorus of wings instead of notes, a lantern rests, ready to cradle a cup of seed and turn rust into welcome. Nine, vintage lantern bird feeder, lantern and teacup sanctuary. Imagine a lantern that traded flame for kindness. It hangs where the branch remembers storms, a quiet square of metal and glass turned sanctuary. Inside, a porcelain cup rests like a small heart, patterned, patient, holding a scatter of seed the color of dusk. The light sifts through leaves and touches the rim in a soft halo, and the garden seems to breathe a little slower, as if listening for tiny wings. There is history in the hinge, a whisper of nights on porches and paths. Now the hinge answers to wind. The lantern's sides wear a film of time, a gentle patina that makes everything warmer, older, true. A lavender border leans close, offering its calm. Pebbles hold a path steady beneath, and somewhere nearby, rosemary writes its clean green syllables into the air. This isn't ornament, it's welcome. A pause you can hang from a hook. It turns the ordinary into invitation, the forgotten into a place where life returns and lingers. Even when the cup is still, the scene feels full, like a table set for a friend you haven't met yet. And just beyond this quiet square, another circle waits to sway, humble tins finding rhythm in a hanging ring of light and seed. Framed succulent wall, living picture on brick. Imagine a picture that grows its own shadows. The frame is simple, wood that remembers hands, and behind it, a weave of mesh and moss holds small galaxies of green. Rosettes press outward like quiet stars, pale jade to silver blue, each leaf carrying a soft powder that turns sun into velvet. The wall becomes a page, and the garden writes on it slowly, one living letter at a time. Brick holds the warmth of earlier afternoons. You can feel it in the mortar, a stored sunlight that slips gently into roots. Below, a few crates lean into their purpose, pots stacked like commas, a stone that feels like a period at the end of a calm sentence. Nothing insists, everything agrees. The eye follows a spiral leaf, then another, then the whole arrangement resolves into a rhythm you can almost hum. Here, height becomes a kindness for small spaces. Green climbs, light answers, and the day acquires a new edge where color meets clay. If you stand close enough, the scent is only suggestion. Clean, earthy, faint as memory. Step back, and the wall turns into a horizon for growth. Beyond this living picture, another surface waits. Glass within a jar, a world that sways from a single knot of twine. Fairy garden and miniatures, tiny worlds, real materials. Imagine kneeling at the edge of shade where the day speaks in whispers. The ground turns to velvet, moss stitched in small breaths, and a path of pebbles curves like a secret. A house no taller than a hand wears a bark roof and twig bones. Beside it, a bottle cap becomes a table, corks settle into the shape of chairs, and a fence of twigs keeps nothing out but welcomes attention in. You can feel the slow generosity of the place. Light sifted through leaves, cool air collecting in the hollows, the shy perfume of time rising when brushed by a breeze. It isn't make-believe, it's attention. Materials that remember the tree, the river, the afternoon pocket where they were found. The smallness does not shrink the moment, it distills it. Here, memory and curiosity share the same seat, and time loosens its grip long enough to let wonder count the minutes. A pine cone becomes a tower. A bit of driftwood leans like an elder with stories. When you stand, the world keeps its proportions, but something inside has grown. An acre of quiet carried in the palm. And along the fence line, a soft gleam gathers, ready to scatter sunlight into delicate fragments of day. "12. Mirrors and light reflectors, borrowed sunlight, borrowed sky." Imagine a wall that learns to breathe. Along the fence, a rectangle of driftwood gathers the day and returns it. Sky poured into wood, leaves painted twice, once in green and once in light. The grain holds a shoreline memory. Each ridgeline lifts the reflection like a small tide. Beside it, a constellation of round mirrors blinks gently, dozens of tiny suns stitched to weathered boards. They do not shout. They scatter brightness the way laughter leaves the mouth, brief, warm, unforced. You feel the garden widen. Petals multiply in the quiet arithmetic of reflection. Herbs seem taller where the horizon doubles. A breeze arrives, and the CD spinners write quick rainbows on the path, thin ribbons of color that vanish the moment you try to hold them. Imperfection only sweetens the spell. A nick in the frame, a soft fog on old glass, a seam where grout remembers touch. Light is not decoration here, it's company. It leans against rosemary, slides across stone, tucks itself into ivy, and stays a little longer than afternoon. As the gleam softens, the garden clears its throat for evening, and somewhere nearby a small jar waits, ready to cradle a private weather of moss and breath. "13. Solar jar path and lampshade orb, borrowed stars in a basket." Imagine evenings stitched to the garden with points of warm light. A wire lampshade, once the skeleton of a shade, now holds a small constellation. Micro-LEDs looping like fireflies that chose to stay. Suspended above the path, it gathers dusk the way a bowl gathers rain, bright enough to feel like welcome, soft enough to leave the dark intact. Below, jars line the gravel like low moons, lids sipping daylight and giving it back without hurry. The glow rests on time and pebbles, turning each footprint into a quiet ceremony. There's a hush you can hear in color. Amber brushing the edges of rosemary, a subtle sheen on stone, the fence becoming horizon as reflections multiply. Nothing in this light begs to be seen. It invites you to notice. The wire ribs speak in circles, the copper thread writes a gentle script, and the jars breathe steady as sleeping hearts. You sense company even when the path is empty, stories arriving with the night, choosing places to sit. When the last birds fold their wings, The garden remembers noon without pretending it is still day. And just past the curve, words wait on wood and tin, ready to name what grows and what hope asks us to keep. "14. Garden signage and markers, words that root themselves. Imagine the garden learning its own language. Along the beds, names bloom in wood and metal, mint written in a steady hand, thyme pressed into a spoon that once set a table, rosemary spelled on enamel like a whisper meant to linger. The words are small, but they hold the weight of seasons. Spring's quick breath, summer's patient heat, the quiet arithmetic of roots dividing light into flavor. Each marker wears a little time, the chalk not quite erased, a curl of twine holding memory against the wind. The fence becomes a page. A welcome board leans into afternoon and turns sunlight into legible warmth. Patina isn't decay here. It's a story told in soft edges and thumb-smoothed corners. Names steady the eye, slow the step, and make a map out of green. So a hand reaches for what it loves without guessing. So a leaf becomes not only leaf, but the syllable of a meal, the echo of a shared table. To name a thing is to promise you'll notice it. The labels are small promises, scattered like breadcrumbs across soil, guiding you home by way of scent and memory. And just beyond the words, water waits, finding its own voice in a chain of shining cups. "15. Rain chains and water features, music for the edge of a roof. Imagine the roof learning to sing. Where the downspout once hurried the weather away, a string of cups now slows it into syllables. Water gathers, pauses, and lets go. Each ladle wears a soft green memory of time. Each drop sketches a circle in the bowl below, then another, until the surface writes a poem you can read by listening. The stones keep score in shining commas, darkening as they drink. Ferns lean toward the music the way old friends lean toward a story. In the corner, glass murmurs. A kettle breathes a thin silver thread into a shallow dish, and the garden answers with a hush that feels like gratitude. There's no hurry here. Even rain is persuaded to take the long way home. Light breaks into small, bright decisions along the chain. Reflections blur into a gentle vocabulary that turns weather into welcome. What remains afterward is a clean fragrance, the cool grammar of shade, and a sense that the day has learned better manners. Water finds its place, and so do you, standing where sound becomes stillness, where motion becomes rest. Beyond the bowl the ground widens, asking for a path that remembers color and touch beneath your feet. "16. Stepping stones and walkways, footprints that remember light. Imagine the ground speaking in circles and commas, each stone a syllable set gently into earth. Underfoot, the day cools. Concrete holds the night's last breath while sun braids warmth along the edges. Here a leaf has signed its name, veins pressed into gray like music paused on a page. There a ring of bottle caps catches light, small moons locked in a quiet orbit. A mosaic disc answers with color where the path curves, glass remembering old plates, ceramic recalling a conversation you can't quite place. The rhythm is not straight, only sure. Stones drift like stepping thoughts through time, and the fragrance rises when the air leans in. You feel the slow courage of going somewhere softly, of measuring distance by attention rather than hurry. The garden learns your pace. It begins to match your breathing. Imperfections settle into pattern, the way memory learns to be kind. Look long enough and the walkway becomes a map, from shade to brightness, from doing to being. It does not end so much as lift, pointing your gaze from ground to sky. And there, just above the path, the first vertical notes gather, ready to stack light and leaves into a gentle upward song. "17. Hanging and stacked garden towers, vertical whimsy from forgotten things." Imagine the garden learning to rise. From a slender pole, dishes climb like quiet planets. Porcelain, pastel, a memory of dinners stacked into a small ceremony of height. Sun lifts along the rims, writing thin halos where circles meet air. Nearby, a colander becomes a cradle, its constellation of holes turning rain to lullaby, ivy to waterfall. And the clear plastic of a salad spinner, humble, practical, now breathes herbs into the breeze, mint and basil releasing cool stories each time the leaves are touched by light. Vertical feels like hope in slow motion. The ground remembers, but the eye travels upward, measuring grace by inches. A plate, a saucer, a cup of green. Twine knots show their work without apology. Patina settles where time has a favorite seat. The air tastes a little brighter near this small ascent, as if the day learned a taller word for itself. It is simple to believe in height when it arrives this gently, stacked from leftovers, lifted by rope, blessed by a branch. Even the shadows lengthen with better posture. And when the wind wakes, the vertical hush will ask for company, for a handful of silver and a scatter of charms to make the air sing. "18. Mobiles and spinners, air that plays with light." Imagine the wind remembering a kitchen. A wooden rolling pin, scuffed by flour and mornings, hangs like a pause between sentences. Below it, soda tabs flicker into silver syllables, chiming in a voice the day has almost forgotten. Nearby, a wire basket has learned to hold light instead of fruit. Keys and rhinestones drift from its rim, little constellations that rearrange themselves whenever the breeze decides to edit the sky. Farther along, a ring of thread and patience, an embroidery hoop, turns beads into slow rain. Sun threads itself through glass and twine, and the garden reads the shimmer as music. Nothing here is loud. The air is a careful composer. Notes meet leaf shadows, metal leans into memory, and the old softens into something newly true. You feel the quiet get taller as the mobiles breathe. The way a room changes when someone you love walks in and doesn't need to speak. Motion becomes meaning. Sparkle becomes time. When the breeze rests, the hangings grow still enough to be listened to with the eyes. And just beyond their hush, a small world in glass waits. Moss, pebble, driftwood, holding a forest the size of a breath, patient as a heartbeat in a jar. "19. Terrariums, worlds that fit in a hand." Imagine a forest that learned to whisper inside glass. Pebbles settle like riverbeds at the bottom of the world. Charcoal draws a clean breath. Soil remembers rain even when the sky forgets. Moss unfurls in slow green handwriting, and a small curl of driftwood takes the shape of a story you almost recall. In the hanging bowl, light swims across the curve, pausing on tiny leaves as if time had come to sit with them a while. On the bench, a jar becomes a window. The horizon is only a few inches away, yet the distance feels generous. These are rooms for quiet weather. Condensation gathers like soft punctuation, then slides back into the root of things. An air plant holds stillness the way a hand holds water, enough to feel, never enough to keep. Look long enough and the terrarium begins to breathe with you, matching the rise and fall, the way a resting animal does beside a trusted friend. What grows here isn't only green. Patience grows. Attention grows. The sense that smallness is a kind of sanctuary grows. Set the jar down, and the larger garden seems to lean closer, as though learning from this little country how to be both wild and held. Mini ponds and water bowls, quiet water, small footprint. Imagine a sky small enough to rest in your hands. In a shallow bowl, light collects and loosens, silver at the edges, blue in the middle, a ripple turning seconds into circles. Pebbles sleep under the surface, each one holding a secret brightness that only water can remember. A lily leaf floats close to the rim, a green ear listening to the day. A single flower drifts by like a slow comet, carrying scent and silence in equal measure. The tiniest fountain breathes, and bubbles stitch air to reflection, mending what the wind unravels. Around the basin, moss learns your weather, the way a friend learns your footsteps. Stones gather like kindly shoulders, keeping the hush in place. This water doesn't try to impress, it invites. You can measure your heartbeat here by the time between ripples, by the way sunlight writes its name across the surface and lets it fade without regret. The bowl teaches that depth is not a distance but a feeling, and that peace can be shallow in the most generous way. Turn from the glimmer and the rest of the garden looks gentler, ready for soft sound and low light, the evening chorus and the first small lamps to bloom. Mirrors and light reflectors, sunlight you can rearrange. Imagine sunlight learning new tricks. Against the fence, a driftwood frame holds a quiet fragment of sky, tipping it toward the ground until daisies bloom twice, once in soil, once in silver. Nearby, a constellation of tiny mirrors gathers morning into bright syllables, scattering soft answers across the leaves. A string of old discs, ordinary, once forgotten, turns the wind into a painter, laying thin rainbows on cedar and thyme. Reflections are just memories with better timing. They arrive when the day leans at the perfect angle, when a petal decides to speak in light instead of color. The driftwood keeps its ocean in the grain. The glass keeps its calm like a held breath. Even shadows stand taller beside a mirror, practicing a brighter posture. You begin to notice how the garden edits itself, how sparkle draws the eye, then releases it gently back to green. There is no noise here, only a choreography of glints. The small surprise on a rose leaf, the slow blink across lavender, the fence learning to glow without moving. When the sun drifts lower, the shine softens to a hush, and the path ahead feels like a page turning, ready for words written in stone and the rhythm of steps that follow. "22. Garden signage and markers, words that root themselves. Imagine a garden where the names of things bloom alongside their leaves. Basil is not only scent but handwriting. Thyme is not only flavor but a chalk line that remembers morning light. A sliver of slate leans into the soil and grows a word the way a stem grows a leaf. The letters feel cool under a fingertip, softer where the dust of earth has smudged the tail of a Y. On the fence, an enamel tray holds a small promise. Welcome, grow with love. Its chipped edge a gentle confession that beauty can be older than its gloss. Along the path, little cutting boards swing from twine, each with a name that steadies the eye: mint, sage, parsley. The breeze turns the tags into slow metronomes, keeping the rhythm of seasons. The gravel listens and keeps the beat. To name a plant is to remember it, and remembering is another kind of watering. The garden speaks in aromas and shade. The signs answer in patient syllables that don't fade when the flowers do. Words root themselves here, quietly, like seeds that choose to be seen. Ahead, the path narrows and brightens, and even the stones seem to carry a sentence the feet can read. "23. Rain chains and tiny fountains, music that follows the weather. Imagine rain taught to walk, one silver footstep after another, down a ladder of cups into a small, listening pool. The first drop touches copper and finds a voice. The next learns the note and carries it lower. Spoons become bells. Tea strainers turn to tiny constellations where water pauses, gathers itself, and lets go. Below, pebbles hold the echo like warm hands, rounding the sound until it is only hush and shine. On afternoons when clouds are only promises, a hidden bowl breathes for the chain, lifting a thread of water so the music doesn't forget its words. Patina grows the way stories do, slowly, beautifully, along the rim of use. Around it, ferns memorize the spray. Time records each splash on its small green page. Even the air changes temperature beside a falling line, cooler by a whisper, brighter by a blink. A rain chain does not ask for storms. It asks for attention, and then gives it back as rhythm. You can measure quiet here, not by silence, but by how gently sound sits with the leaves. When the dripping softens, the garden seems newly tuned, ready for a path that glimmers and the next gentle surprise waiting just beyond the eve. "24. Jar lanterns and solar orbs, when night learns to bloom. Imagine evening arriving like a kind librarian, dimming the room and opening a quiet book. Along the path, jars begin to breathe, little lungs of light drawing dusk into honeyed circles on stone. The glass remembers fingerprints and summers past. The glow forgives them, turning smudge into halo. At the edge of the seating nook, a wire basket learns the language of fireflies, each filament a syllable, each pause a comma where the night can rest. Above, an old lampshade sheds its fabric and becomes a moon that forgot its sky. Ribs of memory hold a warm center, Leaves translate it into shadows that look like lullabies. The garden rearranges itself around light the way a conversation rearranges itself around a truth. Softly, without argument, with room for listening. You notice the air cooling, the lavender deepening its voice, the gravel answering footsteps with a gentler consonant. None of this asks for more than darkness. The jars keep close company with the ground. The orbs rise just enough to invite wonder. Between them stretches a thread you can follow without looking. Warmth stitched to pathway, pathway stitched to chair, chair stitched to the long exhale of a day. Ahead, the night opens wider, and the garden answers with stars of its own. "25. Thrift Chair Bench Nook. 2 stories become a seat." Imagine a seat made from 2 different afternoons. One chair that remembers laughter, another that remembers rain, joined by a board that has carried more than one kind of weight. Together they make a pause you can actually sit in. Paint softens where hands have learned the route. The wood carries a quiet map of grain and knot, like rings of a story retold. A crate stands ready with a teacup and a sprig of rosemary, turning the corner into company. Around the bench, time writes its green cursive along the gravel. Lavender leans closer as if to offer a sentence in scent. Dappled light drifts across the plank, arriving and leaving like gentle conversation. Nothing here is perfect, and that's why everything belongs. The nicked spindle, the hairline crack, the plank that's a shade too honest. Use has made these things kind. A seat like this does more than hold a person. It holds a moment, asking the garden to slow down and answer in birdsong. You can feel the day exhale as you settle, the small clink of cup on wood, the hush that follows. When you rise, the space keeps your shape for a while, and the path ahead seems to open just enough for whatever comes next. If one idea whispered to you, let it take root. Tell me which piece you'll try first and what you'll make it from. If this brought you peace or inspiration, like, subscribe, and share it with a friend who loves small, beautiful transformations. Next week, we're exploring mini ponds and water tricks, gentle reflections, tiny fountains, and moonlit glow. Until then, may your garden be full of second chances, and may they shine.